So, welcome everyone to this webinar on Prepare for the Fair. We're really pleased to have so many people here today. We're really excited to be running our fairs again in person this year. So back on campus after not having been able to do that for the last couple of years. So before I get into it, just to introduce myself briefly, my name's Jess Henderson and I'm one of the career managers here. So I work in the Central Careers Service. It's the career service that's organised all the career fairs, and myself and my fellow career managers are also linked to specific schools. So you might see us out and about in your schools during the year as well. So as I said, I know people are still joining. This session is being recorded, just to be aware. If you do have questions that you didn't get a chance to submit before the session on the Padlet, please note the Padlet's now closed. So if you have any questions, use the Q&A feature in Zoom and I'll come to those at the end if we have time. This is a webinar, so your cameras and microphones will all be muted and turned off. Please leave them that way. Again, as I mentioned, it is being recorded. If you want to ask a question, use the Q&A feature. I'm going to keep on repeating this as people are still joining, and don't use the chat. So just a bit in terms of how the session today is going to work. Brief bit of context, so a bit about the labour market, kind of what's going on in that at the moment, and also a bit about the graduate labour market specifically. Then I will be moving on to say a bit about the fairs, how to make the most out of them, how to prepare, and then there'll be the opportunity to ask questions. So my slides don't seem to be progressing. Bear with me a second. Just going to have to share my slide deck in a different manner with you. Okay, I think we're back. Sorry, we're having all these technical issues today. So hopefully you can now see my slide. So I just wanted to start a bit with the current context. You know, there is some negative news around at the moment. In the last couple of years, there was kind of a better bounce back than expected post the pandemic, and that resulted in lots of opportunities. Obviously, you know, the energy crisis and stuff at the moment, there's a lot of debate as to whether we might go into recession in the UK, and I know some other countries around the world. So I wanted to sort of acknowledge that. You might be seeing, you might be hearing things and a bit worried. I think the good news from your point of view as students and those looking for graduate roles potentially is that graduate recruitment does always tend to hold up better, even during economic downturns. So recruitment did bounce back for student and graduate recruitment as well post-COVID. And actually the difference we saw this time to maybe previous recessions or economic downturns in the UK at least was that a lot of the graduate recruiters maintained their graduate hiring throughout the pandemic because they'd learned previously that they needed to keep that talent pipeline. Some companies just had to stop or limit their internships back in 2020 because they weren't set up to do them remotely. But again, most of that's come back. And again, graduate salaries in the UK, at least on the whole, are up. So there's a web link there. I should also say at this point, I will be sharing these slides afterwards as well, so you'll be able to access any of the links from them. So the first thing I would encourage anyone thinking about attending a careers fair to do is consider, what are you hoping to get out of it? So across our fairs, we've got the first one coming up tomorrow, the Careers and Internship Marketplace. So that's probably the biggest and most diverse in terms of remit. There will be graduate recruiters there talking about their graduate opportunities. There might be charities or voluntary opportunities. There might be part-time opportunities, internships across all sorts of sectors. So it's really worth you thinking a bit about what are you hoping to get out of the fair? And why are you attending? If you can approach it with some sort of goals in mind, then you're more likely to find it fruitful and successful for you. And similarly, we have subsequent fairs coming up over the next couple of months. I'll provide details of all the upcoming fairs at the end of today, but think about the same sorts of things. So are you maybe early on in your studies and just wanting to get a sort of feel for which kinds of organisations might target Glasgow students particularly? Are you specifically looking for a graduate role for after your course? Are you wanting to get sort of insights from recruiters on maybe what makes applicants stand out from them? Are you just looking to sort of expand your network, or anything else? So spend a bit of time thinking about why am I going and what am I hoping to get out of the fair? In terms of preparing, the number one thing I would say, and I'll pick this up in relation to some of the questions that were submitted in advance as well, but it's really important that you actually take the time to sort of research the employers who are attending each fair that you're going to go to. Look into the kinds of opportunities they have, what sectors they work in. A lot of them will have information about their internships, their graduate recruitment, or any current vacancies that they have obviously on their website or careers pages. So make sure you look through all of that thoroughly first. That will also help you decide who you want to speak to specifically at the event. The topic of what to wear kind of came up in a couple of the questions as well. So I'll address that here, but think about what you're going to wear in advance. Some of the questions that were submitted were along the lines of, is it formal, or what should I wear, or what's the dress code? We don't have a dress code as such for any of our fairs, but it's worth thinking a bit about what you're going to wear. So there's no expectation for you to dress formally or business attire. But what I would say is maybe think about the kind of first impression. So an easy way, if you want to look at it like this, to help yourself stand out is maybe to dress a bit more smartly or formally than you would for your average day in university, but you don't have to. I think the most important thing is, wear something that you'll be comfortable. So we're not suggesting a full kind of suit or formal business attire, but maybe something that's at least presentable, but that you'll be comfortable in. And if you think about that in advance, then that saves you having to worry about that on the day. Think about how you'd introduce yourself. So you may or may not have attended careers fairs previously. What will be really useful for you and probably help you feel more confident, and again help you get more out of the day before attending, is if you think a bit about, okay, if there's an employer I want to speak to, how am I going to introduce myself? And quite an easy formula for that is think about your name, your course, what particularly you're interested in, and any specific questions that you have for them. So again, if you've done your research beforehand and maybe you've identified a particular graduate opportunity that they have, you've looked at the information on their website about it, but you have a couple of questions, that's a really good way to introduce yourself. So, hi, my name's Jess. I'm a final year, psychology student. I'm really interested in your marketing graduate scheme. I see that you look for X and Y. could you tell me a bit more about, what that role involves day to day? So what kind of projects might I be doing, or what have previous people in that role gone on to do, or what makes an applicant stand out for you, or is there anyone in that role here today that I could speak to? So basically whatever you want to know. And again, it comes back to what I said before about thinking about what you're wanting to get out of the day and attending, and that will help you when you want to introduce yourself to people. As part of that, it's really worthwhile spending a bit of time reflecting on yourself. So have a brief summary, and I mean very brief summary, of your skills, experiences and interests. So to continue with my previous example, if I were interested in marketing, I would want to be thinking about, okay, what do I have that can demonstrate my if I was speaking to an employer about, I don't know, a marketing graduate scheme or a specific role in marketing, be it digital marketing or something like that, I would want to be able to sort of catch their attention by saying, oh, I was communications officer for such and such a student society, or I've done this previous internship and I learned this, and I think it could be a really good fit. So think about what are your sort of, I guess, selling points for the role that you're interested in. If you're not at a stage where you've got, or you don't find specific roles of interest, I don't want anyone to be sitting here now thinking, gosh, I don't know, or I'm a first year undergraduate, I haven't thought about any of this. It's fine to go along and just sort of have a float around the day, see which employers are there. But again, even in that scenario, if you can do some research beforehand online about the employers, you might find something that sounds really interesting and that you do actually want to speak to, and maybe ask if they offer internships or work experience opportunities, or what kinds of skills or experiences they really look for when they're recruiting graduates, because that might help you think about things you want to get involved in at university to help you develop those things. As I've just been saying, really what you want to find out. So it's worth thinking about that on an individual basis, depending on how clear or not your own career interests are at this stage. You might find in your research and looking at the employers that there might only be a couple of employers that you want to speak to, but that's fine, because in a way that gives you an opportunity to hopefully get some really good quality, do a lot of research on them, ask some, several maybe very pertinent questions that would help you with your decision making of, actually, is this an employer I might want to apply to? And if so, what sorts of things might strengthen my application from their point of view? The other thing I will say at this point is, particularly if you haven't attended any careers fairs before, is they can be somewhat overwhelming and intimidating. So I think at tomorrow's fair, we've got somewhere in the region of 45 employers there. There'll be hundreds of students, so we're expecting it to be quite busy. So that can feel a bit overwhelming, and you might not feel comfortable approaching stands. What I would say is all the employers who are coming to any of our fairs are there because they want to talk to students like you. A lot of the time, employers, particularly when they're talking about internships, placements, graduate opportunities, they will bring current graduates or current interns or alumni of the university to their careers events. So there might be people on the stands who were in your position fairly recently and are able to give their insights to it. So yeah, I really would encourage you to kind of bite the bullet, as it were, and think, particularly if you do have questions, to take advantage of this opportunity to meet employers or representatives from the employer organisations and get their insights, because you might find out, even if you've got no ideas at the moment, you might find out some career ideas that you hadn't previously considered or weren't aware of. So they can be really valuable opportunities. Good way to do that is if you have some questions prepared and chat. If in doubt, if there are graduates working with them who are at the stand, you can ask them about their role, why they chose that organisation, perhaps anything that they found particularly interesting. you know, how they ended up doing what they were doing, that sort of thing. Think about the follow-up. Again, I think some questions came up on the Padlet that were submitted in advance about this. How and if you follow up with representatives from fairs will, I guess, very much depend on the individual company representatives. So some people might be really happy for you to get in touch with them afterwards. Others might prefer not to. So my best advice there is, if you have a useful conversation with somebody on the day at the fair, ask them, and you want to stay in touch. So just ask them, is there any way, if I have follow-up questions, would I be able to contact you, or is there someone else? So see what they say. Employers or recruiters might be happy to connect with you on LinkedIn if you have LinkedIn, or they might be open to receiving emails. A lot of the bigger graduate recruiters would probably refer you to a general email address about their recruitment, but not always. And again, particularly if you speak to alumni of Glasgow University, they might be more than happy for you to ask them to connect on LinkedIn afterwards. Another really useful tactic, again, in the sort of busyness of the day, it can be difficult to remember, but again, if you have a good conversation with somebody at the fair, once you've moved away from their stand, take a minute or two just to make some brief notes. So that might be the person you spoke to, the key points, and any immediate feelings you have about that organisation. So, this might be somebody you really want to apply to, or you might have been put off by something that they said. Just capture that information and that immediate reflection, because that will help you both in terms of thinking about, do I want to apply for this organisation, but can also potentially help you find and narrow down other potential ideas you have, or things that might have emerged for you as being quite important when you're looking at employers that you hadn't necessarily considered previously. Okay, so I've kind of rattled through that quite quickly. What I wanted to move on to now was the sort of the questions that were submitted in advance of today. So I'm just going to stop sharing momentarily. And bring up the questions. So I think we've addressed some of these already. I basically just sort of reordered these based on the number of likes that these had from the questions that were submitted in advance of the session beforehand. So the first question there is, should I take copies of my CV? I would say probably don't worry about taking copies of your CV. Most employers who are there probably won't be set up to accept paper copies of CVs. Certainly for graduate roles and internships, if you're looking for part-time work, it might be worth taking along some copies of your CV. But generally, I wouldn't worry about that. What I would say and encourage you to do, you may or may not have LinkedIn already. If you don't already, it's worth setting that up. That kind of is like an online version of your CV or your resume. And that can be a good way to sort of, as I was just saying, connect with employers after an event as well. So taking along a CV isn't essential by any means. If you want to, you can, in case employers are happy to accept them. That these days, most employers, if it's not for sort of part-time or casual work, probably won't be taking copies of CVs on the day. Did the dress code previously. So if anyone has since joined, there isn't a dress code as such. Our general advice would be to wear something comfortable, but maybe on the smarter side of what you would wear for a typical day at university. So this one, the postgraduate student, asking for a 1-year postgraduate student, when is the appropriate time or month to apply for jobs? I'll answer that first part of the question first. This really depends. If you are interested or think you might be interested in the sort of larger graduate recruiters who recruit graduates in large numbers each year onto graduate training schemes and training programs, these are often the blue chip or multinational companies, then now is the time to start looking. And appreciate if you've only just started your 1-year masters, that might feel quite soon. But in the UK, at least, a lot of those companies open for applications pretty much up to 12 months in advance. Their application processes are quite lengthy as well. So that's partly why they open up in advance. So you might have to do an initial online application, then some online testing, potentially a video interview, and then an assessment centre. So all that can take quite a few months to work through. That's not to say that those are your only opportunities. So generally speaking, most organisations will advertise roles as and when they have a vacancy to fill. So yes, some graduate roles, a lot of them do open very early, but their application windows actually often stay open quite long. But other organisations, maybe particularly smaller, medium organisations or organisations who are only recruiting 1 or 2 graduates, might open for applications quite later in the year. The second part of that question is about your major being about economics. So should you get some part-time jobs or internships to enrich my CV besides the experiences back to undergraduate experience? Yes, the more experience you can get, the better. So depending on what you're thinking of doing after your masters, you could try looking for internships in related areas, or internships which will allow you perhaps to practice and apply some of the skills that you're gaining in your master's course, for example. So we have the internship hub and the part-time job hub, which are places to look on Glasgow Careers. Again, I'll show you the website at the end, where you can find potentially internship opportunities or part-time roles. A question here about, after the networking event, how should I follow up with people? So what to email them after the event. So again, I touched on that earlier. I would recommend asking people if they're happy for you to follow up with them afterwards. And basically, I guess, you could, if they answered all your questions and you don't have further questions and don't have any more afterwards, you could maybe just drop them a courtesy email to say, dear whoever, it was great to meet you at the Careers and Internships Marketplace at Glasgow, or whichever fair it is. Thanks so much for your help. I looked at the things you suggested, or it was really useful, and just a thank you. If maybe they suggest some things for you to look at and you do, and then you have following questions, obviously ask them the follow-up questions if they've indicated they'd be happy to respond. What I would say with any of that is, first and foremost, obviously make sure you thank them. And if they do suggest resources, people, places for you to look for things, let them know what you did with that advice as well. Because, most people are happy to help, but they want to know if you're following the sort of advice that they gave you. Graduating soon and not from the UK. So I'm a visiting student for the fall semester. Okay. Have a psychology major and creative writing minor. Okay. So how should I approach the career fair, considering I cannot work in the UK? I think it's probably a good opportunity. I'm assuming from your question that you're also not looking to work in the UK. You can just approach it as an opportunity to sort of find out and gather information. Some of the employers might be multinationals. So again, it could be an opportunity to speak to them, find out if they have offices or locations in your home country or wherever you might be looking for work, and using it like that. But by and large, the employers attending our events will be recruiting roles for their UK offices. It's not to say that they don't also have offices and graduate opportunities elsewhere, but they'll be looking at the UK recruitment primarily. What kind of jobs are available to someone studying creative writing? I want to know about both part-time and full-time opportunities. So I don't know if this is at the fair specifically or more generally. I think in terms of the upcoming fairs, I'm not aware off the top of my head of any that might be your sort of directly linked careers, but I will caveat all of that with saying it depends what you want to do. So lots of people who study creative writing either go on to write themselves, whether that be, novels, plays, anything else, or go into fields like publishing. I don't know if there are any publishers, for example, attending the event, but it would be something to look at. And in terms of opportunities, I would just look for opportunities to write. So outside of those, what one might think of as their directly linked careers, any opportunity to write. So copywriting, whether that be for websites, for marketing, anything like that, that's something that you'll find in all sorts of careers. There'll be opportunities at Glasgow maybe to write, or writing yourself if you don't already through keeping a blog, are all great ways to sort of develop skills that can help you then when you do come to apply for roles. I think if it's a bigger question, you might want to look specifically based on what your interests are to find individual opportunities or organisations that might recruit people in the sorts of areas that you're looking for. Moving on to qualifications for positions. How do we talk about jobs we want but do not have experience with and will not encounter in our major? That's a great question. So this person saying, I am a psychology major and want to know more about marketing and get into fields that are not necessarily directly connected to psychology. So again, I'll caveat this with saying in the UK graduate market, at least, it's very, very common and a lot more common than it might be in other countries for students and graduates to go into something that might be completely unrelated to their degree subject. Marketing and advertising are actually quite common destinations for psychology graduates in the UK, as it happens. So what I would suggest that you do is you can look at sort of what skills and experiences, knowledge is required and sought after in marketing roles. So again, lots of big companies will recruit people in marketing because it's something that all organizations need. And a lot of the skills that they're looking for will be, yes, that kind of understanding of maybe human behavior that you get through the psychology, but also generic things like communication skills. So you'll find if you look, for example, if you just did a Google search on graduate marketing roles, many opportunities will welcome graduates of any degree discipline. What I would do in that instance, there's a website called prospects.ac.uk, and that has job profiles as well as careers advice. I'm just going to pop it in the chat. So if you're unsure of what sort of skills experience might be sought after in particular sectors, that's a good place to look for sort of general things that they'll be looking for, and that might help you think about how you talk about your degree and highlight the relevant things from that. Somebody here along a similar theme, graduating with a degree in mathematics, which feels relatively general. How can I sell myself an employer over someone who's qualified with a more specialized degree? Okay, so again, similarly to what I was just saying, I would really encourage you to look at the role for that particular employer. So, are you interested in, I don't know, marketing jobs with them or consulting jobs with them? See what roles they're looking for, and that will help you think about what skills and attributes and experience, if applicable, you have that's relevant. I think there's often a lot of concern among students that, they will obviously, prefer somebody who's done, if I'm looking at accounting roles, they'll prefer someone who's done an accounting degree. And it's often not the case, actually. Employers, particularly recruiting graduates in the UK, are often looking for that kind of potential. So they'll be interested in what else you've done around your degree. In a maths degree, for example, you will be developing, really strong analytical skills, the ability to think critically, potentially working with other people, group work, communication. So think about the kind of general skills, and then maybe what else you've done around your degree, whether that is part-time work or volunteering, or if you've got any internships. But like I said right at the beginning of starting to answer, if you're doing that through the lens of looking at the roles that they have available or that they recruit in, seeing what they ask for, and that will help you think for your own individual circumstance, oh, actually, I could talk about this or that. I think I've answered the next one already. What is the best way to introduce yourself? So brief introduction, name, maybe what course you're on, if you've seen a particular opportunity of theirs that you're interested in, or what sort of things you're interested in generally, and any kind of questions that you have. Next one, new entered postgraduate. I have many courses on weekday. Do I have chance to find some appropriate part-time job? Yes, in general, lots of part-time work, particularly in sectors like maybe retail or hospitality, which are all sort of really struggling to recruit staff at the moment. A lot of that might be work jobs that are available during the evenings or weekends. So again, if you look on Glasgow Careers site for part-time roles, you'll find that a lot might be available outside of your course contact hours as well. So I'll pick up this one. Interested and want to find out and know more about the appropriate forms to get into part-time freelancing opportunities in my newly acquired data science analytics skills, things like business intelligence, reporting, data integration, where you also have prior experience. Okay, good. Data science, data analytics are massive areas in demand across pretty much every sector at the moment. So if you're specifically looking for part-time roles using or applying some of those skills, I would say look at things like the Internship Hub. I know, for example, a couple of months ago, they advertised a couple of summer internships with the university's insights and analytics team, but they also work with lots of other employers. So that's one place. You could also look on a more general job site, somewhere like Indeed.com. Look for people who are advertising for data analysts, data scientists. Even if they're advertising for a full-time role, if you can see who the employer is, it might be worth reaching out to the employer, what's called speculatively. So say, I see that you're currently advertising for this full-time role. I'm currently doing this course at Glasgow, looking for part-time work. Would you ever have any part-time opportunities? And see what they say. I have a lecture between 10 and 11. Will I be able to get in? Even if you're a few minutes late? Yes, you can. There's no cut-off time for arriving at the fair, any of the fairs actually. So we appreciate that students have lectures and timetables vary. So just arrive when you can. And yeah, you'll be able to gain entry. Postgraduate major in global economy. What kind of part-time job can I get during this year? Not very picky. Okay, so yeah, I would just say maybe look at what part-time jobs are available through both the like on Glasgow Careers. Basically, I'll share the website in a minute, but if you filter on part-time work, that will give you a flavour of the kinds of roles that are available. As I mentioned before, lots of opportunities for part-time and flexible hours do tend to be in sort of retail, hospitality sectors. So that can be one of the maybe easier places to find opportunities that might work flexibly around your studies. But the internships that we advertise, sometimes they might be part-time throughout the year as well. So if you just have a look and see what it is, again, depending on your particular areas, if you're trying to do something related to your degree, seeing which opportunities might give you the option to sort of apply those skills or knowledge. And yes, lots of roles that are advertised generally will be full-time, but if you see things that you're interested in and think you'd be a good fit for, there's nothing to stop you trying to reach out to that employer and asking if they would consider or able to consider it on a part-time basis. Okay, the last question, someone wanting to become an entertainment or culture writer, where can I apply? Again, in terms of the fairs, I don't know off the top of my head of any specific organisations, but I would certainly have a look. More generally, look for publications, be they, hard copy, online ones, who cover those sorts of sectors. And some organisations will offer internships, freelance writing opportunities, those sorts of things. So it will just be a case of looking and researching and keeping an eye out locally as well if you're wanting to do something locally. Okay, how are we doing for time? All right, I'm going to come to the Q&A now. So I'm just going to go through in terms of, looks like we've had quite a few questions in the session. So I'll just try and work through these as well. I'll answer them live. Will any of the representatives from the University Careers Service be there tomorrow at the fair? Don't think the link to campus job on careers website works anymore and you have to scroll all jobs to find the uni jobs. Yes, there will be staff from the careers service there tomorrow, so we'll all be wearing our green lanyards. And if you have a look, there is a fair guide as well. Again, I will just share my screen with you. There is a fair guide that's available now for tomorrow on the event details page, both on Glasgow Careers and on the website. So that tells you about the fair, and there's also an exhibitor plan, so you can see where to find employers. Sorry, I wasn't sharing that. So if you're wanting to speak to careers people specifically, or I think the internship hub, it'd be worth going and maybe raising that question with them. Okay, so answered that one. Next question is, how should I approach professors about wanting to do an internship in their laboratories? Great question. I would just try asking them. I know that sounds a bit flippant. So if they're a professor who you also have lectures or seminars or any tutor groups with, you could just ask them there. If not, you could try emailing. What I would say is that professors, as with all academic staff, well, as with all staff, are quite busy. So maybe look and see if they have office hours at all, and you could actually go and ask that. The reason I'm saying that is sometimes if you email, you might hear back, but they will get hundreds or thousands of emails every week, so things can get buried. So ideally, try and catch them in person, either if you have any of their lectures, asking there, or if they have office hours. But if not, maybe try emailing them, and you might probably need to follow up an email as well. So give them a couple of weeks, and if you don't hear back, maybe ask a follow-up question. How do we find out? Next question is, how do we find out about employers attending? So it's all on in this fair guide, which is available, linked to from the event on Glasgow Careers site, as well as from the website. So I'm just going to pop in a link. I mean, if you just search Glasgow Uni Careers Fairs, you'll find the main page on our website that has all our upcoming fairs. I'm going to pop this in the chat as well, just so it's easier. But you can also access it from the Glasgow Careers site. So at the moment, the only fair guide is available for the careers fair that's happening tomorrow. Others will be added onto the respective careers fairs at nearer the time. So I think like shortly before the events basically. But that lists all employers, but you can also see a list of employers attending on the page on Glasgow Careers. So how do you talk to employers with jobs that you really like but don't have experience, especially if you're in a fourth year? Okay, great question. I would come back to what I was saying earlier as well. So look at their jobs, think about why you're really interested in that company, those jobs. Look at the skills that they're asking for. Again, a lot of the time, they won't be looking for particular degrees. They won't be looking for particular experience necessarily in terms of work experience. Yes, that helps, but they'll often be looking for quite generic transferable skills, and they'll be looking at recruiting based on kind of potential often. So if you can show them if you've done additional projects or taken steps to learn about something in your spare time, maybe even if you don't have formal experience of it, something like that will be great. If you've held positions of responsibility, like in a student club or society, leadership positions, all of that's really good because it says stuff about you as an individual. So employers like people who will kind of be proactive and take the initiative. So even if you don't have formal experience, most graduate recruitment isn't looking for loads of previous formal experience in that specific area because they know that many students have come to university straight from previous education, so haven't worked. So they understand that. What you'll need to show to them is that you can evidence the kinds of skills that they're looking for, and that will often be very general transferable skills like communication, ability to work with other people. So think of examples where you've done those things. And if you're in your fourth year and thinking, oh, I wish I'd done an internship or whatever, like, don't worry about that. You can only do and start from where you are now. So I would encourage you to go and have those conversations and maybe, think about, see which employers you're interested in, see what they look for. So when you're going to talk to them, you can be like, okay, I've done this, this, and this. So I've got evidence of these competencies. However, I'm a bit worried that, I haven't done an internship in this area, and ask them, like, will that make a difference? The next question, when do we get to attend these fairs? So again, the details, I'll be sharing again the dates of the fairs, but the first one is happening tomorrow. It's in person, so it's at Kelvin Hall, tomorrow's fair, between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. Each fair is in a different venue, so there's basically 4 careers fairs. So there's the one tomorrow, the law fair next Wednesday, then there's an engineering and technology fair on the 19th of October and a science fair on the 25th and 26th of October. And in addition, we've got the Go Abroad fair that happens on the 5th of October. So details of all the upcoming fairs are on that last link I shared, but you can find them on Target Connect as well. And as I said earlier, it's just a case of come into as much of any of them as you can. So I've just covered the timings. That was the next question. Are there any media organisations coming to the fair? It depends what you mean by media organisation. You'd need to just have a look, depending on the fairs that you're interested in, if they're coming. I mean, if there aren't, then have a look and try and find those kinds of organisations yourself and see what they offer with internships, graduate jobs. Obviously, we're only ever going to be able to host a limited number of employers, but there will be hundreds of thousands of opportunities out with those specific employers. Where can I find a list of the employers who are visiting the fair? So hopefully covered that as well. Again, all the details are on the website. Should we take a CV printout? No, you don't need to take a CV with you. You can if you want, but most employers probably won't be accepting them in paper format on the day. There isn't a specific CV or resume format, although I would just go with UK CV conventions. You'll be able to find what those are on our main careers service website. I'm going to stick a link in to finding information about CVs. So if you aren't familiar with UK, or even if you think you are, it's worth just having a look at CVs. There are some example CVs on there, and that's a sort of good general format to use. Another one about resumes. Are there provisions for students with disabilities? It depends, I guess, what your specific needs are. There is a contact email address on the main event page if you do have particular needs or need things in an accessible format, whether those be things like the Fair Guide. There is a contact email address for my colleague Joe McDonald on the Fair information page on Glasgow Careers. Share a couple of final things. So I will share a link to this slide deck in the chat in shortly, and there are some links to things at the end of the presentation that might help you more. And there are also details of other upcoming fairs. So let me just grab that link to share with you. So this is a link to where you'll be able to access the slide deck. So I've just popped it in the chat. Do make a note of that. It's just bit.ly/fairprep22. Either copy that link or make a note of that link now so that you can access it after the session. So yeah, if you do need to go, thanks very much for coming. Apologies again for the technical issue at the end, and I will carry on. I can stay here for another couple of minutes, so I'll just try and get through these last 5 questions if I can. So if I want to do research at university in the future, how can I apply for those types of roles? So that would be a case of looking at opportunities within universities themselves. I don't think there aren't universities as such attending these general fairs for their recruitment. Some of them are there to talk about postgraduate study. So I would recommend, if you're looking in the UK, there's a website called jobs.ac.uk that advertises jobs at UK universities, or if you're specific universities that you're interested in, it will just be a case of looking at their own recruitment sites. Question, who exactly is this fair for? Is this for people graduating in the year 2023 September, or people who have just recently graduated? Both and anyone. So it's open to all current students. It's open to those who have recently graduated, as well as those who are maybe looking for opportunities for next autumn. So again, come along if you meet any of those criteria and see who's there. Next question is, any difference between internship and work placement? Not necessarily. It's just terminology, and some people use the two terms interchangeably. Some employers might distinguish and define a work placement as maybe a longer one, and an internship is something that might happen in the summer or a shorter period of time, but that will vary from employer to employer. So on the face of it, there isn't a cut and dry, hard and fast rule, no. So I would undertake both of them to potentially mean similar things, essentially. So a third-year undergraduate student major in business economic and business management without any internship experience before. Do I have any advice for me to get internship opportunities or other experiences to enrich my CV? Yes, I mean, look at what internship opportunities there are. Look on the internship hub. That's a great place to start. Look for part-time roles potentially, but also voluntary roles can be a great way to develop skills and experience. Taking on positions of responsibility within student clubs or societies are other great things to do. or helping to organise events for those. You know, obviously committee positions will have been filled for this year already, but look at those sorts of things as well. If you're concerned about, you know, lacking formal experience, there's lots of opportunities you can get involved in around university, I guess, that employers value as well, those extracurricular activities. Okay, final question, and then I will stop. Somebody studying MSc stem cell engineering, interested in an internship or volunteer opportunity at field related companies. Okay, yeah. So in terms of, I mean, there's the engineering and technology fairs and the science fairs coming up in October. So those would be good ones to look at. And in terms of what sort of disciplines companies who are attending fairs recruit into, it will just be a case of looking. So I know off the top of my head, I think the main employer sponsor for tomorrow's fairs is Thermo Fisher Scientific. So it might be worth you looking at them. But generally speaking, none of our fairs individually have hundreds and hundreds of employers attending. So it is relatively easy to have a quick look through and see which ones are relevant. If you're interested in something quite related to quite a niche or specialized area like that, I would also just recommend that you look online generally. So look for companies, if you're looking locally to Glasgow, look for companies in the area that do sort of stem cell engineering or related fields, and try approaching them yourself as well, or looking at their career pages. Okay, this final question now, because it's just come in and it's quite a useful one. Is it okay to ask employers what benefits they provide to their employees or what packages such as salary? I mean, yes, it's fine. I think, you know, check to see if that answer isn't already available elsewhere. If it is, you know, you might want to, I guess, arguably asking that kind of question at a fair is one way of doing it. You might not get a straight answer. They might say, oh, it depends on the role, you know, how much experience you've got. But a lot of bigger companies particularly will have general information on their career sites about their benefits. So again, kind of check there beforehand. Generally speaking, we do try and encourage employers when they're advertising roles to share the salary, but they don't always. So yes, you could, but you might not get a straight answer, or the person at the fair might not necessarily know either. So yeah. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you all for coming and for your patience with the technical issues. The recording will be available. I've shared the chat, the slide link in the chat, so hopefully you'll be able to access those. And yeah, we hope to see you at some of our fairs. As I said right at the beginning, it has been a while since we've done them in person, so we're really excited. We've got the first one tomorrow, and then the law fair next week. I'm just looking for the details so I can give you the right dates. The technology and engineering fair on the 19th of October, and then the science fair on the 25th and 26th of October. So hopefully see you at one of those soon.